The soft glow of stadium lights brings back memories of a player who changed football forever. His name was Zinedine Zidane, but his story began long before the world knew him as Zizou. In the narrow streets of Marseille, a young boy learned to dance with a football, creating magic in the most unlikely places. This is not just another tale about goals and trophies. This is the story of an artist who painted masterpieces on grass, a man whose journey from the concrete playgrounds of La Castellane to the grand stages of world football teaches us that greatness often comes wrapped in the quietest packages. Picture a small apartment in Marseille where 5 children shared dreams bigger than their cramped rooms. The youngest would become a legend, but back then he was just Yazid, a boy who preferred his middle name because Zinedine felt too formal for the streets where he learned his craft. His father, Smail, worked long hours at a warehouse, coming home exhausted, but always finding time to kick a ball with his son in the courtyard below their building. His mother, Malika, kept the family together with warmth and endless cups of mint tea, watching from the window as her youngest son spent hours juggling a worn leather ball against the apartment building's wall. If you enjoy this soothing story of the legends of football, please like the video, subscribe to Legends of Football, and ring the notification bell, and write in comments from which country you are watching this video. The neighborhood of La Castellane wasn't known for producing football stars. It was known for broken streetlights and police sirens, for unemployment lines and forgotten dreams. But in these harsh surroundings, something beautiful was growing. Young Yazid found his escape through football, using the uneven concrete as his training ground, the graffiti-covered walls as his passing partners. The other kids in the neighborhood would gather to watch him play, mesmerized by the way he could make the ball obey his every command. He wasn't the fastest runner or the strongest fighter, but when the ball came to him, time seemed to slow down. His brothers would protect him from the rougher elements of the neighborhood, creating a shield that allowed him to focus on his passion. They understood that their youngest sibling had something special, something that couldn't be taught in any academy. It was in his blood, in the way he moved, in the way he saw the game differently from everyone else. While other kids played football, Yazid conducted symphonies with his feet, turning simple passes into works of art that left even the toughest street kids speechless. The local youth club, U.S. Saint-Henri, became his first real stage. The coach there, Robert Centenero, was more than just a trainer. He became a guardian angel for the shy boy who barely spoke, but whose feet told stories that words never could. Centenero would drive Yazid to training when his parents couldn't, slip him money for food when times were tough, and most importantly, he believed in him when few others did. This wasn't charity. It was investment in genius that only a trained eye could recognize beneath the quiet exterior. Every Thursday, Centenero would take Yazid to matches around Marseille, not just to play, but to watch and learn. They would sit in small stadiums, studying how professional players moved, how they created space, how they thought 2 steps ahead. Yazid absorbed everything like a sponge, his dark eyes tracking every movement, his mind filing away techniques he would later perfect in ways no one could have imagined. These weren't just football lessons, they were master classes in understanding the beautiful game's deepest secrets. The transformation from street footballer to organized player wasn't easy. In the structured environment of youth football, Yazid's creative instincts often clashed with tactical discipline. Coaches wanted him to pass quickly, to follow patterns, to fit into systems. But Yazid played with an artist's soul, seeing possibilities where others saw only obstacles. He would hold the ball a second longer than necessary, not out of selfishness, but because he could see a better option developing, a more beautiful solution emerging from the chaos of the game. His temperament, inherited from the proud Kabyle heritage of his parents, sometimes got the better of him. When opponents targeted him with rough tackles or racist remarks, Yazid's fists would answer before his mind could intervene. These moments of rage worried his family, who knew that talent alone wouldn't be enough if he couldn't control his emotions. His father would sit him down after these incidents, speaking in the Berber tongue of their ancestors, teaching him that true strength came from turning the other cheek, from answering violence with beauty. The football pitches of Marseille became his university, each game a lesson in survival and expression. He learned to protect himself not through aggression, but through anticipation, always knowing where the next tackle would come from, always finding space where none seemed to exist. His style evolved from necessity. When you're not the strongest or fastest, you must be the smartest. He developed that famous Zidane turn, a movement so simple yet so effective that defenders would watch helplessly as he glided past them like smoke through fingers. At 14, opportunity knocked in the form of a youth tournament that would change everything. As Cannes had sent scouts to watch other players, boys with more obvious physical gifts, louder personalities, better connections. But fate has a way of revealing genius when it's ready. The player Monsieur Varro was supposed to watch broke his wrist in warm-ups, a painful twist of fortune that would redirect the course of football history. As the injured boy was rushed to the hospital, Varro himself offered to drive, missing the first half of the matches. When he returned, slightly frustrated at missing his scouting opportunity, he noticed a skinny kid wearing number 13, moving across the pitch like he was dancing to music only he could hear. Every touch was deliberate, every movement calculated yet flowing naturally. Varrod forgot about the player he was supposed to watch. He forgot about everything except the boy who seemed to have magnets in his boots, drawing the ball to him with supernatural ease. The conversation that followed would echo through football history. Varrod asked the local coach about the mysterious number 13. The response was casual, almost dismissive. "That's Yazid Zidane from La Castellane. Quiet kid, bit of a temper, but he can play." Those simple words underscore how close the football world came to missing one of its greatest artists. If Varrod hadn't returned from the hospital, if he hadn't been curious enough to ask, if 100 small moments had unfolded differently, Zidane might have remained Yazid from the neighborhood, his genius confined to the streets of Marseille. But Varro saw what others missed. He saw the intelligence in those dark eyes, the way Yazid processed the game at a different speed from everyone else. He saw how teammates became better simply by playing alongside him, how his presence elevated the entire team's performance. This wasn't just talent. This was a different understanding of football itself, a philosophical approach that turned sport into art. The invitation to join Cannes' academy should have been a dream come true, but for the Zidane family, it presented a dilemma. They were protective of their youngest, wary of sending him away from home at such a tender age. The academies had reputations for being harsh, impersonal places where young dreams went to die as often as they flourished. Malika Zidane worried about her quiet son surviving in such an environment without family support. Jean-Claude Elinaud, one of Cannes' directors, understood these concerns. In an act of extraordinary kindness that would have profound implications for football history, he offered to take Yazid into his own home. The boy would live not in dormitories with other academy players, but as part of the Elinaud family, sharing a room recently vacated by Elinaud's son, who had joined the military. This wasn't just accommodation, it was adoption into a football family that would nurture his talent while protecting his gentle nature. The early days at Cannes were challenging in ways no one had anticipated. Yazid, now increasingly called Zinedine as he entered the professional environment, struggled with homesickness. He would call his mother every evening, speaking in Kabyle so his new family wouldn't understand his moments of doubt. The food was different, the atmosphere more serious, the pressure constant. But he never complained aloud, never asked to go home. Instead, he channeled his emotions into his training, spending hours after regular practice perfecting his touch against the academy walls. His new teammates initially didn't know what to make of him. He barely spoke during team meetings, never joined in the boastful banter that young players use to establish pecking orders. But on the pitch, he commanded respect through his actions. Passes would arrive at teammates' feet with perfect weight, creating opportunities they didn't even know existed. He made everyone around him look better, though few understood how he did it. The coaching staff at Cannes faced a dilemma. Zinedine's style didn't fit conventional tactical systems. He wasn't a traditional number 10 who stayed high up the pitch. He wasn't a conventional midfielder who simply distributed passes. He was something unique, dropping deep to collect the ball, then surging forward with those long, elegant strides that would become his trademark. Some coaches wanted to restrict him, to make him more predictable, more coachable. But the wiser ones recognized that you don't cage a bird that's meant to soar. His first season with the Cannes reserves was an education in professional football's harsh realities. The third division of French football was a world away from the technical beauty of youth tournaments. It was agricultural, physical, sometimes violent. Opponents quickly identified the skinny teenager as a target, using every trick to intimidate him. They pulled his shirt, stood on his feet, whispered threats and insults. But Zinedine was learning, adapting, finding ways to survive without sacrificing his artistic vision. The moment that changed everything came during a reserve match on a muddy Tuesday evening in front of perhaps 50 spectators. The senior team coach, who rarely watched reserve matches, had stopped by out of boredom. What he saw made him forget whatever troubles had brought him there. This teenager was playing football from another dimension, finding passes that shouldn't exist, controlling the ball in impossible situations. By the end of the match, the coach had made his decision. This boy needed to train with the first team immediately. But the path from training with professionals to actually playing in matches was blocked by club politics. The board members, businessmen who understood balance sheets better than football, saw only risk in playing an unproven teenager. They had invested in experienced players, proven quantities who could keep the club in the top division. Why gamble on a kid who looked like a strong wind might blow him over? For an entire season, Zinedine trained with the first team but never played a competitive match. Lesser spirits would have broken, demanded transfers, or lost motivation. But Zinedine used this time to study, to learn the professional game's rhythms and requirements. He watched how senior players prepared for matches, how they managed their energy, how they dealt with pressure. Every training session was a masterclass, every practice match an examination he was determined to pass. His breakthrough finally came through necessity rather than choice. Injuries and suspensions had decimated the first team for a crucial match. The coach, despite pressure from above, had no choice but to include the teenager on the bench. When he finally entered the match in the 73rd minute, something shifted in the stadium's atmosphere. The ball began moving differently, with purpose and poetry. Cannes, who had been struggling, suddenly looked like a different team. That 20-minute cameo should have guaranteed more opportunities, but football rarely follows logical scripts. The board remained skeptical, the coach caught between his football instincts and political pressure. Zinedine continued his pattern of training brilliantly and waiting patiently, never complaining, never causing problems. His silence was often mistaken for weakness, but those close to him recognized it as strength of a different kind. The goal that announced Zinedine Zidane to French football came in his fifth appearance, spread over 3 months of frustrating bit parts. It wasn't just any goal, it was a statement of intent, a declaration that a new artist had arrived. Receiving the ball 35 yards from goal with his back turned, he controlled it with one touch, spun past his marker with the second, and before anyone could react, had struck a shot so pure that the goalkeeper didn't even move. The stadium fell silent for a moment, processing what they had just witnessed, before erupting in recognition of genius. The club president, perhaps feeling guilty about his earlier skepticism, gifted Zinedine a red Renault Clio the next day. It was a modest car for what would become an immodest talent, but Zinedine treasured it. He had never owned anything so valuable, had never imagined that playing football could provide such rewards. He drove it carefully, almost afraid to scratch it, a symbol of how far he had come from the streets of La Castellane. But success brought new challenges. Suddenly, there were agents circling, promising riches if he would sign with them. There were bigger clubs sending scouts, whispers of transfers that could change his family's life forever. Marseille, the club he had supported as a child, began showing serious interest. For a boy from the city, playing for l'Homme was the ultimate dream, wearing the shirt his heroes had worn, playing in the Stade Vélodrome where he had once sat in the cheapest seats. The negotiations with Marseille became a soap opera that would teach Zinedine hard lessons about football's business side. Initially, everything seemed agreed. Marseille would sign him after his military service, a peculiarity of French law that required all young men to serve their country. It seemed perfect. He would complete his duty while remaining close enough to play occasionally for Cannes, then join his boyhood club as a more complete player. Military service was another education entirely. Zinedine found himself in barracks with young men from every corner of France, most of whom had never heard of him and couldn't care less about his football ability. He cleaned toilets, marched in formation, learned to shoot rifles he hoped never to use in anger. But even here, his talent couldn't be hidden. During recreational time, impromptu football matches would break out, and word spread through the base about the quiet recruit who could do impossible things with a ball. The Army, recognizing the PR value of having a professional footballer in their ranks, allowed him to travel for important Cannes matches. But this split existence took its toll. He would train with his military unit in the morning, travel to Cannes for football training in the afternoon, then return to base at night. His fitness suffered, his touch became less certain, and slowly Marseille's interest began to cool. The Marseille saga turned into a farce that would have been funny if it hadn't affected real lives. First, they tried to reduce the transfer fee, claiming Zinedine's form had dipped. Then they involved another player, Alan Bakšić, in a complex deal that would see him loaned to Cannes as part of the arrangement. But when Bakšić played against Lyon and got their goalkeeper sent off, Lyon's executives cried foul, claiming the loan arrangement was illegal. Lawyers got involved, threats were made, and eventually the entire deal collapsed. By the time the dust settled, Marseille had withdrawn their interest entirely. Their coach, Raymond Goethals, delivered the final insult, telling journalists that Zinedine was too slow for modern football. This from the man whose team would win the Champions League that very season. It seemed that Zinedine's dream move had turned into a nightmare, his reputation damaged by circumstances beyond his control. Cannes, relegated and financially desperate, needed to sell players to survive. Zinedine, despite his obvious talent, was not attracting the interest his ability deserved. His name was mentioned in meetings almost as an afterthought. "We also have this midfielder, Zidane, if anyone's interested." The boy who would one day become the world's most expensive player was being offered around like surplus stock. Bordeaux's interest came almost by accident. They had arranged a meeting with Cannes to discuss signing two other players, Jean-François Daniel and Eric Guéry. Roland Courbis, Bordeaux's manager, attended more out of courtesy than genuine interest in the players being offered. But when Cannes officials, desperate to raise funds, began listing every player available for transfer, the name Zidane caught Courbis's attention. The Bordeaux manager knew the name vaguely, remembered hearing about a talented youngster who had shown promise before his military service. On a whim, more than anything else, he asked to include Zidane in the deal. Cannes, relieved to be selling anyone at that point, agreed to a fee so small it would later become embarrassing, just 3.5 million francs, barely enough to keep Cannes afloat for a few more months. When Zinedine arrived at Bordeaux, he found something he hadn't expected: friends who would become brothers. Christophe Dugarry, the striker with the golden touch and silver tongue, immediately took the quiet midfielder under his wing. Bixente Lizarazu, the tireless full-back with the heart of a lion, became his roommate and confidant. Together, they formed a triangle of trust that would carry them to heights none of them could have reached alone. Dugarry was everything Zinedine wasn't: loud, confident, comfortable in the spotlight. But he recognized something in the quiet midfielder that others missed. He saw how Zinedine processed the game, how he could spot passes that existed only in imagination until the moment he played them. Dugarry made it his mission to build Zinedine's confidence, to make him believe he belonged at this level. Their partnership on the pitch was telepathic. Dugarry would make runs into spaces that seemed covered, trusting that Zinedine would find him. And Zinedine always did, threading passes through impossible angles, delivering the ball with such perfect weight that Dugarry barely had to break stride. They didn't need to look at each other. They simply knew where the other would be. Lizarazu provided the defensive foundation that allowed Zinedine to express himself. The fullback would cover endless ground, winning the ball back and immediately looking for Zinedine, knowing that giving him possession was the quickest route to creating danger. In return, Zinedine would drop deep to help when Lizarazu was caught upfield, their partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. The three of them would stay after training, working on combinations that became Bordeaux's signature moves. They developed a shorthand, gestures, and glances that communicated complex tactical ideas in milliseconds. Other players watched in amazement as the trio turned Bordeaux from relegation candidates into European contenders through sheer force of understanding. But it wasn't just about football. They supported each other through personal struggles, through injuries and self-doubt. When Zinedine received racial abuse from opposition fans, Dugarry and Lizarazu flanked him, ready to fight anyone who crossed the line. When Dugarry's form dipped, Zinedine would stay after training to help him rediscover his touch. When Lizarazu struggled with homesickness for his Basque homeland, the other two would take him to Spanish restaurants, trying to ease his longing. The transformation of Bordeaux under this triumvirate was remarkable. From a team that had just been promoted, they became one of France's most exciting sides. Their football was different from the pragmatic style that dominated French football at the time. They played with joy, with expression, with a freedom that made neutrals fall in love with them. Zinedine's first season at Bordeaux saw him score more goals than ever before or since. 10 goals in the league from midfield was impressive enough, but it was how he scored them that caught attention. Long-range strikes that seemed to defy physics, delicate chips that embarrassed experienced goalkeepers, headers that came from nowhere. He was adding weapons to his arsenal, becoming more than just a creator. The UEFA Cup run in his second season would become legendary in Bordeaux folklore. It started modestly enough, victories over unfancied opponents that barely made the back pages. But as the competition progressed, something special was building. The team believed they could beat anyone, and that belief centered on their magical midfielder who seemed to get better with each round. The match against Real Betis should have been routine, but Zinedine turned it into an exhibition. His goal that night, a 40-yard volley straight from the goalkeeper's clearance, was so audacious that even his own teammates couldn't believe it. The Spanish press, not easily impressed, dedicated pages to analyzing how he had even attempted such a shot, let alone scored it. But nothing compared to the night AC Milan came to Bordeaux. The Italian giants had won the first leg 2-0 at the San Siro, and everyone considered the tie over. Milan had Maldini and Baresi in defense, De Sailly and Albertini in midfield, Weah and Simone in attack. They were European royalty facing French pretenders. The Bordeaux players noticed something during warm-ups. The Milan players were laughing, joking, already mentally on the plane home. Zinedine gathered his teammates and spoke more words than he usually did in a month. "They don't respect us. Let's show them who we are." What followed was one of the great European nights, a performance that announced Zinedine Zidane to the continental stage. He was everywhere that night, dropping deep to collect the ball, surging forward to create chances, tracking back to help defend. But it was his vision that destroyed Milan. Passes that the Italian defense, the best in the world, simply didn't see coming. He found Dugarry for the first goal with a ball that split 3 defenders. The second came from a run that started in his own half, leaving De Sailly sprawled on the turf. The third was pure poetry, a back heel that left Baresi, the great Franco Baresi, standing still in confusion. The 3-0 victory sent shockwaves through European football. Milan hadn't lost by such a margin in European competition for over 30 years. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about this Zinedine Zidane, this quiet genius who had orchestrated the downfall of the mighty Rossoneri. The spotlight that followed was uncomfortable for someone of Zinedine's temperament. Interview requests flooded in from across Europe. Agents promised fortunes if he would sign with them. Big clubs sent representatives to every Bordeaux match, their intentions barely disguised. But Zinedine remained focused on Bordeaux, on the team that had given him his chance, on the friends who had become family. His performances for the French national team were becoming impossible to ignore. The debut against the Czech Republic, where he came on with France 2-0 down and scored twice to rescue a draw, had been just the beginning. Aimé Jacquet, the national coach, was building a team around Zinedine's unique gifts, recognizing that he had a player who could unlock any defense if given the right support. But international football brought new challenges. Some established players resented this quiet newcomer being given such importance. They questioned his temperament, pointing to the red cards that dotted his record. They wondered aloud whether he had the mental strength for the biggest occasions, whether his artistry would wilt under pressure. The 1996 European Championships in England would be his first major tournament, a chance to prove himself on the international stage. But fate intervened in the form of a car accident just months before the tournament. Zinedine escaped with heavy bruising, but the psychological impact was significant. For the first time, he confronted his own mortality, the fragility of the gifts that had brought him so far. He recovered in time for the tournament, but wasn't the same player. His touch was hesitant, his famous vision clouded. France stumbled through the group stages and fell in the semi-finals to the Czech Republic on penalties. The same opponents he had rescued a draw against on his debut had ended his first major tournament. The press was brutal, questioning whether Zinedine had the nerve for international football's biggest stages. Back at Bordeaux, he threw himself into rehabilitation, both physical and mental. He worked with sports psychologists, something unusual for that era, learning techniques to control his temper and manage pressure. He studied videos of his performances, identifying moments when emotion had overcome reason. This was a turning point, the beginning of his transformation from talented player to complete footballer. The interest from Juventus had been building for months. The Italian giants had watched him destroy Milan, had scouts at every Bordeaux match, had made discreet inquiries about his availability. They saw in him the missing piece of their puzzle, the creative force that could finally bring them the European Cup that had eluded them for so long. The negotiation was swift and decisive. Juventus offered a transfer fee that Bordeaux couldn't refuse, wages that would transform Zinedine's family's life, and most importantly, the chance to test himself at the highest level. Serie A in the mid-1990s was football's pinnacle, home to the world's best players and most sophisticated tactics. It was where reputations were truly made or destroyed. His farewell to Bordeaux was emotional in a way that surprised everyone, including Zinedine himself. This quiet man, who rarely showed emotion publicly, was seen wiping away tears as he addressed the crowd after his final home match. He thanked everyone, the groundsmen, the kit managers, the tea ladies. He understood that success in football was never individual, always collective. Dugarry and Lizarazu would soon follow him to bigger clubs, their time together at Bordeaux ending, but their friendship enduring. They had proven that French players could compete with anyone, had shown that technical ability and tactical intelligence could overcome physical disadvantages. They had changed how French football saw itself, laying the groundwork for the golden generation that would conquer the world. The flight to Turin represented more than just a geographical journey. It was a leap into the unknown, into a league where defenders were taught to destroy rather than create, where tactical discipline was prized above individual expression. Many wondered whether Zinedine's artistry could survive in such an environment, whether the Italian game would crush his creative spirit. Marcello Lippi, Juventus's coach, had other ideas. He saw in Zinedine not just a luxury player for big matches, but the cornerstone of a new Juventus, one that could dominate domestically while finally conquering Europe. Lippi was a tactical innovator who understood that football was evolving, that possession and creativity would eventually overcome pure physicality and defense. The early training sessions at Juventus were a shock to Zinedine's system. The fitness coach, Giampiero Ventrone, was nicknamed the Marine for good reason. His sessions were designed to push players beyond their limits, to build mental toughness as much as physical endurance. Zinedine, never the most naturally athletic player, suffered terribly. He would often vomit after training, his body rebelling against the demands being placed upon it. But he never complained, never asked for special treatment. He understood that this suffering was necessary, that to survive in Serie A, he needed to be stronger, fitter, more resilient. He embraced the pain, seeing it as another challenge to overcome. Gradually, his body adapted. He gained muscle without losing agility, stamina without sacrificing touch. His integration into the team was complicated by language barriers and cultural differences. The Juventus dressing room was divided into cliques: the Italians, the South Americans, the Europeans. Zinedine, with his limited Italian and natural shyness, initially struggled to find his place. He would eat alone, spend free time in his apartment calling home, wondering if he had made the right decision. On the pitch, things were equally challenging. Lippi initially played him as a deep-lying playmaker, a role that didn't suit his strengths. Italian defenders, the best in the world at their craft, quickly identified him as the danger man and systematically fouled him. Every match was a battle, every touch contested. The elegant football that had flowed so naturally at Bordeaux seemed a distant memory. The Italian press, never patient with expensive foreign signings, began to question the transfer. "Too slow," they wrote. "Too soft for Serie A." One particularly harsh article called him a French dancer lost among Italian warriors. The pressure was building, and for the first time in his career, Zinedine began to doubt himself. The turning point came in a match against Inter Milan, Juventus's bitter rivals. With the score tied and time running out, Zinedine received the ball 30 yards from goal. The sensible option was to maintain possession, to see out the draw. Instead, something inside him rebelled against the caution that was suffocating his game. He struck the ball with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including himself. The ball flew into the top corner, and the stadium erupted. That goal was more than just 3 points in a derby. It was a declaration that Zinedine Zidane would not be tamed by Serie A, would not sacrifice his identity for tactical conformity. Lippi, recognizing the breakthrough, adjusted his system to give Zinedine more freedom. Playing behind 2 strikers with license to roam and create, he began to show the form that had made him Europe's most wanted midfielder. His partnership with Alessandro Del Piero became the stuff of legend. The young Italian striker had the pace and finishing ability that perfectly complemented Zinedine's vision and passing range. They developed an almost telepathic understanding, Del Piero making runs that only Zinedine could spot, Zinedine playing passes that only Del Piero could reach. The 1996-97 season saw Juventus dominate Serie A, winning the Scudetto with games to spare. But the real test was Europe, where Juventus had repeatedly fallen short. The Champions League campaign started brilliantly, with Zinedine orchestrating victories over renowned opponents. His performance against Ajax in the semi-finals, where he dominated a midfield containing Edgar Davids and Clarence Seedorf, was described by Dutch media as football from another planet. The final against Borussia Dortmund in Munich should have been Zinedine's coronation as Europe's best player. But football rarely follows expected scripts. Paul Lambert, Dortmund's Scottish midfielder, was assigned to man-mark Zinedine and executed his job perfectly. Every time Zinedine received the ball, Lambert was there. Every run was tracked, every pass anticipated. It was a masterclass in destructive football, and Juventus lost 3-1. The defeat hurt more than any in Zinedine's career. He had been neutralized on the biggest stage, his influence minimized when his team needed him most. The criticism that followed was harsh, but fair. Great players find ways to influence big matches, even when marked tightly. He had failed that test, and he knew it. The summer of 1997 brought time for reflection. Back in Marseille, visiting family and friends, Zinedine considered his future. Real Madrid and Barcelona had both made approaches, offering even greater wages and the chance to play in Spain's more open, attacking league. But something held him back. He had unfinished business in Turin, a Champions League to win, doubters to silence. His second season at Juventus saw him reach new heights. Free from the pressure of adaptation, comfortable in Italian, integrated into the team's social fabric, he played with a freedom reminiscent of his Bordeaux days, but with added tactical sophistication. He had learned from Serie A's defensive masters, understanding how they thought, how they positioned themselves, how they tried to control space. This knowledge transformed his game. He no longer tried to force passes through impossible angles, but would wait, holding the ball, drawing defenders out of position before releasing it at the perfect moment. His famous roulette turn, which would become his signature move, was perfected during this period, a solution to the tight marking that characterized Italian football. The partnership with Edgar Davids, who joined in January 1998, revolutionized Juventus's midfield. Davids brought energy and aggression that allowed Zinedine even more creative freedom. The Dutchman would win the ball and immediately look for Zinedine, knowing that possession in his feet meant opportunity for the team. They were opposites in style, but perfect in combination. The Champions League campaign of 1997–98 followed a familiar pattern of excellence, followed by ultimate disappointment. Zinedine was magnificent throughout, scoring crucial goals, creating countless chances, dominating midfield battles against Europe's best. The final against Real Madrid in Amsterdam seemed destined to be his moment of redemption. For 66 minutes, it was. Juventus controlled the match, with Zinedine pulling the strings. Every attack flowed through him. Every defensive transition started with his recovery of possession. Then, Predrag Mijatovic scored for Real Madrid, a goal from nothing, and the momentum shifted. Juventus pushed for an equalizer, but Real's defense held firm. Another Champions League final, another defeat. The pattern was becoming painful. Domestically dominant but European nearly men, Juventus and Zinedine seemed cursed in the competition that mattered most. Questions about his big-game temperament resurfaced. Could he deliver when the pressure was highest? Was he destined to be remembered as a great player who never quite reached the summit? These questions would be answered, but not in Turin. The 1998 World Cup in France loomed, a home tournament where heroes would be made and legacies defined. Zinedine approached it with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Playing for France brought unique pressures, the weight of a nation's expectations, the scrutiny of home media, the knowledge that failure would be magnified by proximity. The French team that assembled for the World Cup was talented but flawed. They had world-class individuals but lacked cohesion, had defensive strength but questioned creativity. The press was skeptical, the public hopeful but not expectant. France had never won a World Cup, had often disappointed in major tournaments. Why should 1998 be different? The answer, though no one knew it yet, was sleeping in a modest hotel room in Clairefontaine, preparing for what would become the defining month of his life. Zinedine Zidane was about to step onto the stage he was born to grace, about to write his name into football immortality with 2 headers that would change everything. But before glory came struggle. The opening match against South Africa was workmanlike rather than inspiring. Zinedine played well without being spectacular, setting up Dugarry for a goal that sealed a comfortable victory. The crowd wanted more, wanted the flair and magic they had heard so much about. But Zinedine was conserving energy, understanding that tournaments are marathons, not sprints. The second match against Saudi Arabia would prove pivotal for all the wrong reasons. Frustrated by persistent fouling and provocative behavior from his opponents, Zinedine's temperament finally snapped. A stamp on Fouad Amin in the 70th minute earned him a straight red card, the first for a French player in World Cup history. The walk off the pitch, head bowed in shame, seemed to last forever. The suspension meant missing 2 matches, the final group game against Denmark and the round of 16 clash with Paraguay. From the stands, Zinedine watched his teammates struggle without him, scraping past Denmark and needing Laurent Blanc's golden goal in extra time to overcome Paraguay. The press questioned whether France was too dependent on one player, whether Zinedine's absence had exposed fundamental weaknesses. His return for the quarter-final against Italy was eagerly anticipated but ultimately frustrating. Roberto Baggio and his teammates had prepared meticulously, with Demetrio Albertini assigned to shadow Zinedine's every move. The match was a tactical stalemate, neither team willing to risk defeat by overcommitting to attack. It drifted inevitably toward a penalty shootout, football's cruelest method of separating teams. Zinedine stepped up to take France's first penalty. The weight of expectation was crushing. Miss, and the momentum would shift to Italy immediately. He had practiced this moment thousands of times, but nothing could replicate the reality of a World Cup quarter-final shootout. The walk from the center circle seemed endless, each step echoing in the silent stadium. Gianluca Pagliuca, Italy's veteran goalkeeper, jumped on his line, trying to distract him. But Zinedine had already decided, low to the left, with enough power to beat even a correct guess. The ball hit the net, and France had the advantage they would not relinquish. The semi-final against Croatia showcased everything that made that French team special. Davor Šuker gave Croatia the lead, and suddenly France faced the possibility of elimination on home soil. But this team had character forged through adversity. Lilian Thuram, the defender who hardly ever scored, chose that moment to score twice, his only international goals in a career spanning 142 matches. Zinedine orchestrated the comeback, finding spaces between Croatian lines, dictating tempo when France needed control, accelerating play when they needed goals. The final against Brazil on July 12, 1998, would define careers and shape legacies. The build-up was overshadowed by the mystery surrounding Ronaldo's pre-match seizure, but on the pitch there was only one story. In the 27th minute, Emmanuel Petit's corner found Zinedine Zidane unmarked 6 yards from goal. The header was perfect, powerful, directed, unstoppable. The silence from the Brazilian fans was deafening, the roar from the French supporters primal. The second goal, another header from another corner, killed the contest. This time, Zinedine had to work harder, outmuscling his marker to meet Yuri Djorkaeff's delivery. The ball crashed into the net, and Zinedine wheeled away, his usually composed face twisted in an expression of pure joy and release. All the criticism, all the doubts, all the pressure evaporated in that moment. The celebration that followed was unlike anything France had ever seen. 1 million people lined the Champs-Élysées, chanting, "Zizou! Zizou!" His face was projected onto the Arc de Triomphe, an honor usually reserved for presidents and war heroes. From the boy who couldn't get scouted to the man who conquered the world, the transformation was complete. Or so everyone thought. Returning to Juventus as a World Cup winner changed everything and nothing. The respect was greater, the marking tighter, the expectation heavier. Serie A defenders, never the most forgiving breed, seemed determined to bring the world champion down to earth. Every match became a physical examination, every touch a battle. But Zinedine had changed too. The confidence gained from that night in Paris made him more assertive, more willing to impose himself on matches. The 1998-99 season started promisingly, with Zinedine winning the Ballon d'Or and FIFA World Player of the Year awards. These individual honors meant less to him than team success, but they represented recognition from his peers that he had reached football's summit. The boy from La Castellane was officially the best player in the world, but football has a way of humbling even its greatest practitioners. An injury to Del Piero in November devastated Juventus's attacking options. Without his telepathic partner, Zinedine struggled to influence matches as before. The team's form dipped dramatically, and incredibly, they finished 7th in Serie A, failing to qualify for the Champions League. For a club of Juventus's stature, it was catastrophic. The Champions League campaign offered some redemption, with Juventus reaching the semi-finals despite their domestic struggles. The tie against Manchester United would become another chapter in Zinedine's story of near misses. After drawing 1-1 at Old Trafford, with Zinedine playing brilliantly, Juventus seemed favourites to reach another final. But United, in what would become their legendary treble season, won 3-2 in Turin. Another year, another Champions League disappointment. It was during this difficult period that the first whispers about Real Madrid began. The Spanish giants, under new president Lorenzo Sanz, were building a team to reclaim European dominance. They saw in Zinedine the missing piece, the creator who could unlock defenses and deliver the Champions League trophy that had become an obsession at the Bernabeu. Zinedine was tempted. Spain offered a different challenge, a league more suited to his technical skills, where artistry was celebrated rather than stifled. The weather was better, the lifestyle more relaxed, and, crucially, his wife Veronique's family lived in Spain. But he had signed a contract with Juventus, had given his word to the club that had made him a star. The 1999 to 2000 season would prove crucial in determining his future. Juventus appointed Carlo Ancelotti as coach, a young manager with fresh ideas about how football should be played. Ancelotti recognized Zinedine's unique gifts and built the team around him, giving him freedom to roam and create. The results were immediate and impressive. Playing alongside Pavel Nedved, who had joined from Lazio, Zinedine rediscovered his best form. The Czech midfielder's energy and work rate provided the perfect complement to Zinedine's artistry. They formed one of Europe's most formidable midfield partnerships, combining technical excellence with tactical intelligence. But even as Juventus challenged for honors, Zinedine's mind was elsewhere. The Euro 2000 tournament in Belgium and the Netherlands represented a chance to cement his international legacy. France entered as world champions, but needed to prove that 1998 wasn't a one-off, that they could sustain success over multiple tournaments. The tournament would become Zinedine's international masterpiece. Free from the pressure of home expectations, playing in stadiums where the atmosphere was less intense, he expressed himself fully. Every match was the exhibition of his complete skill set, passing, dribbling, shooting, even defending when necessary. The quarter-final against Spain showcased his evolution as a player. No longer just a creator, he had become a match winner. His free kick that flew past José Francisco Molina was struck with a confidence born from years of practice and big match experience. When Raúl equalized for Spain, sending the match to extra time, lesser players might have wilted. Zinedine simply increased his level, dominating the additional period and setting up Yuri Djorkaeff for the winner. The semi-final against Portugal would provide the tournament's defining moment. Portugal led through Nuno Gomes, and with extra time running out, France faced elimination. A handball by Abel Xavier gave France a penalty in the 117th minute. The pressure was immense. Miss, and France would be out. Score, and they would reach another final. Zinedine placed the ball on the spot with the calmness of someone practicing in his backyard. Vitor Bahia, Portugal's goalkeeper, bounced on his line, trying everything to distract him. The stadium held its breath. Zinedine's run-up was measured, his strike perfect, high into the corner, unstoppable even if Bahia had guessed correctly. The golden goal sent France to the final and sent Zinedine into the history books. The final against Italy was a tactical masterpiece from both teams. Marco Del Vecchio gave Italy the lead, and for much of the match, it seemed the Azzurri's defensive excellence would prevail. But France had weapons beyond Zinedine. Sylvain Wiltord equalized in the 4th minute of injury time, sending the match to extra time and shifting momentum decisively. The golden goal, scored by David Trezeguet from Robert Pires's cross, crowned France as European champions. Zinedine hadn't scored or directly assisted, but his influence was everywhere. In the control France exerted in midfield, in the space he created for others, in the fear he instilled in Italian defenders who couldn't afford to leave him unmarked. 2 major international trophies in 2 years. France had established themselves as a genuine football superpower, and Zinedine was their undisputed leader. But amid the celebrations, his future at club level remained uncertain. Juventus had again fallen short in the Champions League, and the Italian media speculated constantly about his next move. The arrival of Florentino Perez as Real Madrid president in July 2000 changed everything. Perez had won election on a promise to bring the world's best players to the Bernabeu, to create a team of Galacticos that would dominate European football. His first signing, Luis Figo from Barcelona, had proven his ambition and ability to deliver on bold promises. Zinedine would be next. The pursuit was relentless but respectful. Perez understood that Zinedine valued loyalty and wouldn't break his contract lightly. Instead of pressuring him publicly, Perez worked behind the scenes, convincing Zinedine that Madrid represented the natural next step in his evolution. The conversation at the UEFA Gala in Monaco, where Perez slipped him a napkin asking if he wanted to join Madrid, became football folklore. Juventus initially resisted all approaches. Zinedine was their crown jewel, the player around whom they were building for another assault on the Champions League. But as the 2001 season progressed, it became clear that Zinedine's heart was no longer in Turin. He played professionally, never giving less than maximum effort, but the spark that had characterized his best performances was dimming. The fee that eventually secured his transfer, €75 million, shattered all previous records. It was a sum that seemed impossible to justify for any player, let alone one approaching 30. The pressure that came with such a price tag would have crushed lesser personalities. But Zinedine had learned to compartmentalize pressure, to focus on what he could control, his performance on the pitch. His presentation at the Bernabeu drew 75,000 fans, more than many teams attract for actual matches. The number 5 shirt he chose, modest for a player of his stature, reflected his personality. He didn't need the number 10 to define him. His feet would do that. The speech he gave, brief and humble, set the tone for his time in Madrid. "I will give everything for this shirt." The adaptation to Spanish football proved more challenging than anticipated. La Liga was faster than Serie A, more open, with teams willing to attack even against superior opponents. The physical marking was less intense, but the technical quality of opposition players was higher. Every team raised their level against Madrid, seeing victory at the Bernabeu as their season's highlight. His debut against Valencia was uncomfortable, the team struggling to gel with their new star. The Spanish press, never patient with expensive signings, immediately questioned whether Perez had overpaid. "Too old," some wrote. "Past his peak," others claimed. The pressure intensified when Madrid won their opening Champions League matches without Zinedine, who was serving the remainder of his suspension from the previous season. But gradually, the team began to understand Zinedine's rhythms, and he theirs. Playing behind Raúl and Fernando Morientes, with Figo and Roberto Carlos providing width, he had weapons everywhere. The freedom Vicente del Bosque gave him to roam and create suited his evolved style perfectly. He wasn't the dynamic midfielder of his Bordeaux days, but a more cerebral player who controlled matches through positioning and passing. The goal he scored against Bayer Leverkusen in the 2002 Champions League final would define his Madrid career. Roberto Carlos's cross from the left seemed to hang in the air forever. Zinedine, positioned at the edge of the box, watched it drop, adjusted his body, and struck a volley so pure that time seemed to stop. The ball flew into the top corner, and the Hampden Park crowd witnessed one of football's greatest goals on its biggest stage. That moment crystallized everything Zinedine represented: technical perfection under extreme pressure, beauty and simplicity, the ability to produce magic when it mattered most. It was his first Champions League trophy, the missing piece in his collection, validation of his decision to leave Juventus for new challenges. But even in triumph, there were signs of trouble ahead. The Galacticos policy, while generating enormous commercial success, created imbalances in the team. Defensive midfielders were seen as unglamorous, unnecessary, when you had so much attacking talent. The team became increasingly reliant on individual brilliance rather than collective organization. The 2002 World Cup in Japan and South Korea should have been Zinedine's swan song with France, a final opportunity to cement his international legacy. But it became a disaster from the start. A thigh injury sustained in a warm-up match against South Korea ruled him out of the opening two group games. Without him, France looked ordinary, losing to Senegal and drawing with Uruguay. He returned for the final group match against Denmark, but he was clearly unfit, unable to influence the game as France needed. They lost 2-0 and were eliminated without scoring a single goal. The image of Zinedine, head bowed, walking off the pitch in Incheon seemed to signal the end of an era. The golden generation that had conquered the world 4 years earlier had crumbled at the first defense of their title. Back at Madrid, the 2002-03 season brought domestic success, but European disappointment. La Liga was won after a thrilling battle with Real Sociedad, but the Champions League semi-final defeat to Juventus felt like a missed opportunity. Watching his former teammates celebrate reaching another final while Madrid fell short reinforced the fragility of success at the highest level. The arrival of David Beckham in 2003 symbolized everything wrong with the Galacticos project. Another attacking midfielder in a team crying out for defensive reinforcement, Beckham's signing was about marketing rather than football. Zinedine, ever the professional, welcomed the Englishman and tried to make the system work. But privately, he knew the balance was wrong. The 2003-04 season became a slow-motion car crash. Carlos Queiroz, replacing Del Bosque, tried to implement a more rigid system that stifled the creative players. The team had talent everywhere but cohesion nowhere. They were eliminated from the Champions League by Monaco, knocked out of the Copa del Rey by Real Zaragoza, and surrendered their league title to Valencia. For the first time in his career, Zinedine publicly expressed frustration. In carefully chosen words, he questioned the club's direction, the lack of tactical discipline, the emphasis on marketing over football. He was 32, aware that time was running out to add to his trophy collection. The boy who had waited patiently for opportunities was now a man unwilling to waste his remaining years. Euro 2004 in Portugal offered a chance for international redemption. France entered as favorites, with a squad blending experience and youth. Zinedine, playing in a deeper role to accommodate younger attacking players, showed he could adapt his game to his body's limitations. The opening match against England showcased his enduring class. Trailing 1-0 with minutes remaining, France won a free kick on the edge of England's box. Zinedine stood over it, the weight of expectation heavy on his shoulders. David James set his wall, confident his near post was covered. But Zinedine found a gap invisible to everyone else, curling the ball with such precision that James could only watch it hit the net. Minutes later, he converted a penalty with the calmness that had become his trademark, completing a comeback that seemed to announce France's intentions. But the tournament would end in familiar disappointment. Greece, the ultimate underdogs, defeated France 1-0 in the quarterfinals with a defensive masterclass that frustrated Zinedine and his teammates. It was a defeat that hurt more for its manner than its consequence. France had been unable to break down a team that simply defended deep and countered occasionally. The aftermath brought soul-searching. Zinedine announced his international retirement, believing it was time for younger players to take responsibility. At 32, with 93 caps and numerous records, he felt he had given everything to Les Bleus. The reaction in France was mixed. Gratitude for past glories tempered by disappointment that he wouldn't help rebuild the team. At Madrid, the 2004-05 season brought more frustration. 3 coaches, Garcia Ramon, Vanderlei Luxemburgo, and Juan Ramon López Caro, tried and failed to find a formula for success. The Galacticos' era was ending not with a bang, but a whimper, the team's individual brilliance unable to compensate for collective dysfunction. It was during this period that Zinedine began contemplating retirement from all football. The joy that had always driven him was fading, replaced by frustration and physical pain. His body, never the most robust, was breaking down after years of punishment. Every match required days of recovery, every sprint a reminder that time was defeating even him. But Raymond Domenech's appointment as France coach in July 2004 would change everything. The eccentric coach, known for his belief in astrology and unconventional methods, somehow convinced Zinedine to reconsider his international retirement. The conversations between them remained private, but Domenech clearly appealed to Zinedine's sense of duty and unfinished business. The return wasn't immediate. Zinedine watched from afar as France struggled in World Cup qualifying, his resolve weakening with each poor result. When he finally announced his comeback in August 2005, it surprised everyone, including his family. The man who never reversed decisions had changed his mind on the biggest decision of all. His return match against Ivory Coast in August 2005 was emotional beyond expectation. The Stade de France gave him an ovation that lasted so long the referee had to delay kickoff. Every touch was cheered, every pass celebrated. France won 3-0, with Zinedine orchestrating everything, showing that class, true class, never disappears. The qualification campaign's conclusion was nerve-wracking. France needed results in their final matches to secure automatic qualification. Zinedine, despite being 33 and clearly past his physical peak, produced performances reminiscent of his prime. The match against Cyprus saw him score his first international goal in over 2 years, a free kick that proved he retained his technical excellence. Meanwhile, at Madrid, he had made a decision that shocked the football world. On April 25, 2006, he announced he would retire completely after the World Cup. No farewell tour, no gradual wind-down, just a clean break after the tournament. The announcement's timing was strange. Why tell everyone before the World Cup rather than after? But Zinedine wanted clarity, wanted to approach the tournament knowing it was his finale. His last match at the Bernabéu against Villarreal was everything football should be. The crowd, aware they were witnessing history's end, gave him an ovation that lasted throughout the warm-up. He scored, of course he scored, a goal that seemed scripted by Hollywood. The image of him applauding the crowd, tears in his eyes, became iconic. Even Villarreal's players applauded him off when substituted. The 2006 World Cup in Germany would be his last dance, one final opportunity to show the world his genius. France's preparation was chaotic, their form unconvincing, their squad aging. The press predicted humiliation, another group stage exit like 2002. The opening draw with Switzerland, where Zinedine looked every one of his 33 years, seemed to confirm the pessimists. The second match against South Korea was worse. Zinedine received a yellow card that would suspend him from the final group match, and France drew 1-1 against opponents they should have dominated. The team looked disjointed, old, finished. French newspapers ran headlines questioning whether bringing back Zinedine had been a mistake. But something changed in the knockout rounds. Perhaps it was the desperation of knowing elimination meant the end, or maybe it was Zinedine deciding he wouldn't go quietly. Against Spain in the round of 16, he turned back the clock. Every pass found its target. Every touch was perfect. He scored from another free kick, then set up Vieira for a second before halftime. The 3-1 victory announced that France and Zinedine weren't finished yet. The quarter-final against Brazil was redemption personified. This was the team that had humiliated France in 2002, the reigning world champions with Ronaldinho, Kaká, and Adriano. Nobody gave France a chance. But Zinedine produced one of his greatest ever performances. He controlled the midfield like a conductor directing a symphony, finding Thierry Henry with a pass only he could see for the winning goal. Brazil, the favorites, were eliminated, and Zinedine had proven that genius doesn't age, it evolves. The semi-final against Portugal was his penultimate match, potentially his last. When Portugal scored early through a Cristiano Ronaldo penalty, elimination loomed. But Zinedine had one more moment of magic. In the 33rd minute, he converted a penalty with such nonchalance it seemed he was playing in his backyard, not a World Cup semi-final. France won 1-0, and improbably, incredibly, Zinedine would play his final match in a World Cup final, July 9th, 2006, Berlin's Olympiastadion, France versus Italy, in what would become one of football's most dramatic and controversial finals. For Zinedine, it was the perfect ending that turned into Greek tragedy. The opening goal, a Panenka penalty in the 7th minute, was audacious beyond belief. To attempt such a chip in a World Cup final required confidence that bordered on arrogance. But that was Zinedine, always choosing beauty over pragmatism. For 110 minutes, he was magnificent. Every touch was applauded, every pass a reminder of what football would lose when he departed. He nearly scored a winner in extra time, his header saved brilliantly by Gianluigi Buffon. It seemed destined that his career would end with another World Cup triumph, the perfect full circle from 1998. Then came the moment that changed everything. Marco Materazzi, Italy's defender, had been niggling at Zinedine throughout the match. Words were exchanged as they jogged up the pitch. What exactly was said remains disputed, but Materazzi later admitted to insulting Zinedine's sister after being told he couldn't have his shirt. Zinedine walked away, then stopped, turned, and delivered the headbutt that would define his legacy as much as any goal or trophy. The red card that followed meant his career ended not with glory, but ignominy, walking past the World Cup trophy he would never touch again. France lost on penalties, Zinedine watched from the dressing room, and the football world was left to process what had just happened. The greatest player of his generation had self-destructed on the biggest stage, his temperament finally costing him everything. The reaction was extraordinary in its division. Some condemned him for letting his team and country down, for allowing Materazzi to provoke him into madness. Others understood, even admired, his refusal to accept insults about his family. In France, opinion polls showed the public largely supported him, understanding that even legends have breaking points. His apology, delivered days later on French television, was measured and partial. He apologized to children who had witnessed violence, but not for the act itself. "I can't regret it because that would mean he was right to say what he said," Zinedine explained. "It was a very human response from someone who had always seemed superhuman on the pitch." The debate about that moment continues today, but perhaps it's fitting that Zinedine's career ended with such complexity. He was never just a footballer, but an artist whose emotions ran as deep as his talent. The same passion that created moments of beauty also produced moments of madness. You couldn't have one without the other. His retirement was immediate and total. No farewell matches, no testimonials, no gradual fade from public view. One day he was football's greatest player. The next, he was a private citizen living quietly in Madrid with his family. He rejected numerous offers to return, to play in lucrative exhibitions or emerging leagues. When Zinedine Zidane said goodbye, he meant it. The legacy he left behind transcends statistics, though those are impressive enough. 156 goals and countless assists in 797 professional matches, 31 goals in 108 international appearances, every major honor in football except the European Championship with a club. But reducing Zinedine to numbers misses the point entirely. He was about beauty, about making football art rather than just sport. Young players studied his videos not to learn specific moves, but to understand space and time differently. His famous roulette turn wasn't about the technique. Many could replicate the movement, but about knowing when and where to use it. His first touch, which seemed to stop the ball dead no matter how fast it arrived, became the standard against which all others were measured. Coaches struggled to define his position because he transcended traditional roles. Was he a number 10? Not exactly, as he often dropped deep to collect possession. A central midfielder? Not really, as he scored crucial goals and created from advanced positions. He was simply Zinedine, a category unto himself, forcing teams to adjust their entire structure around his unique gifts. His influence extended beyond the pitch into football culture itself. The quiet leader who let his feet do the talking became a template for a different kind of superstar. In an era increasingly dominated by social media and personal branding, Zinedine represented substance over style, though his style was more substantial than most players' entire careers. The streets of La Castellane, where his journey began, now feature murals of their most famous son. Children kick balls against the same walls where Yazid learned his craft, dreaming of emulating his journey. But that journey can't be replicated because it was unique to its time and place. The football world that created Zinedine no longer exists, replaced by academies and systems that might have coached the genius out of him. What remains is the memory of watching him play, of seeing football elevated to its highest form. Those who witnessed him live describe an almost mystical experience, time slowing down whenever he touched the ball. Television couldn't fully capture his impact, the way entire defenses would shift to account for his presence, creating space for teammates he made better simply by existing. His post-retirement life remained characteristically private until 2011, when Real Madrid appointed him as special advisor to President Florentino Perez. It seemed a ceremonial role, but Zinedine took it seriously, studying coaching methods, obtaining his licenses, preparing for something more. When he was appointed coach of Real Madrid Castilla in 2014, many saw it as nepotism. They would soon learn otherwise. The coaching career that followed, 3 consecutive Champions League titles with Real Madrid's first team, something never achieved before or since, proved that his understanding of football transcended playing. He managed egos, rotated squads, made tactical adjustments that surprised experts who thought him merely a motivator. But that's another story, the second act of a life that seemed scripted by destiny. Looking back at his playing career, What stands out isn't just the trophies or the goals, but the way he made people feel. In an increasingly mechanical sport, he represented something organic, human, flawed, but beautiful. He showed that football could be art, that a working-class kid from Marseille could paint masterpieces on grass that would be remembered forever. The boy who was invisible to scouts became impossible to ignore. The teenager told he was too slow became football's conductor, controlling tempo with metronomic precision. The man who lost his temper at crucial moments also produced grace under the highest pressure. These contradictions don't diminish his legacy, they enhance it, making him not just a legend, but a human one. Modern football, with its analytics and algorithms, its expected goals and heat maps, struggles to quantify what Zinedine brought to the game. How do you measure the fear in a defender's eyes when he received the ball? How do you calculate the confidence teammates gained from his presence? How do you evaluate beauty in a spreadsheet? You can't, which is why his legacy endures beyond statistics. Young players watch his highlights not for tactical education, but for inspiration, to see what's possible when technique meets intelligence meets courage. Coaches reference his games to explain concepts that can't be drawn on boards: timing, space, the weight of a pass that arrives not just where, but when it should. The French national team he helped build became a model for multicultural success, showing that diversity could be strength. His quiet dignity in facing racial abuse throughout his career, responding with performance rather than words, set an example for generations of players from immigrant backgrounds. He proved you could succeed without abandoning your identity, that excellence was the best response to prejudice. His relationship with pressure was complex but instructive. He seemed to seek it out, choosing Juventus when Serie A was football's toughest league, joining Real Madrid for a record fee that brought impossible expectations, returning from international retirement when France needed him most. Yet pressure also broke him at crucial moments, the red cards that punctuated his career, showing that even the greatest have limits. The aesthetic he brought to football influenced how the game was marketed and consumed. Highlights packages focused on his touches rather than just goals, understanding that beauty could sell as well as success. The famous Adidas commercials featuring him conducting a football symphony with his feet became iconic, capturing what made him special better than any match footage could. His rivalry with other greats of his era, Ronaldinho's joyful genius, Ronaldo's explosive power, Figo's direct brilliance, elevated everyone involved. They pushed each other to new heights, creating a golden age of football that seems increasingly distant in today's more systematic game. Yet Zinedine stood apart, offering something none of the others could: the ability to make complexity look simple. The technical evolution he represented changed how youth football was taught. Coaches began emphasizing first touch and spatial awareness over pure physicality. The phrase Zidane-esque entered football vocabulary, shorthand for a particular kind of elegant effectiveness. Young midfielders studied his body shape when receiving passes, the way he always knew where pressure was coming from before the ball arrived. His impact on French football culture was transformative. Before him, French players were often seen as technically good, but mentally fragile, capable of beauty, but not victory. He changed that perception, showing that artistry and winning weren't mutually exclusive. The generation that followed, from Ribéry to Pogba to Mbappé, grew up knowing a Frenchman had been the world's best player. The commercial impact of his career helped establish football as truly global entertainment. His shirt sales in Asia, where his elegant style resonated particularly strongly, opened new markets for European clubs. The Zidane brand, despite his personal disinterest in marketing, became synonymous with excellence and class, values that transcended sport. But perhaps his greatest legacy is harder to define: the memories he created for millions who watched him play. The father who lifted his son onto his shoulders to see Zidane warming up. The teenager who practiced roulette turns in the park until darkness fell. The grandmother who knew nothing about football but recognized beauty when she saw it. These personal connections to his genius matter more than any trophy. His story reminds us that greatness often comes from unexpected places, that the best scouts and systems can miss what doesn't fit their patterns. How many Zidanes never made it because they were too quiet, too different, not obviously excellent enough? His journey from invisibility to immortality should make football question its assumptions about talent identification and development. The philosophical questions his career raises remain relevant. Is it better to burn brightly and briefly, or steadily and longer? Can genius be coached or only nurtured? Does the modern game, with its emphasis on systems and statistics, have room for artists like him? These debates continue because Zinedine represented something essential about football that feels increasingly threatened. His influence on tactics was subtle but significant. The role of the modern attacking midfielder, expected to drop deep and drive forward, to create and score, owes much to how he evolved the position. Coaches began designing systems to accommodate such players, understanding that tactical discipline shouldn't suppress individual brilliance, but channel it effectively. The respect he commanded from opponents was remarkable. Defenders who spent careers destroying attacks spoke reverentially about facing him. They described the helplessness of knowing what he would do, but being unable to stop it, the frustration of perfect positioning being undone by an impossible pass. Even in defeat, they acknowledged they had been beaten by greatness. His adaptation to different leagues and systems showed football intelligence beyond mere technical ability. From the chaos of French football to the tactical sophistication of Serie A to the technical demands of La Liga, he succeeded everywhere by understanding what each environment required while maintaining his essential identity. This adaptability became a model for modern players navigating international careers. The psychological aspect of his game was underappreciated during his career, but becomes clearer in retrospect. His presence affected matches before they began, opponents adjusting their tactics to account for him, teammates playing with greater confidence knowing he was there. This mental dimension of his impact was as important as his physical contributions. His relationship with failure was instructive. The Champions League finals lost with Juventus, the red cards that cost his teams, the tournaments that ended in disappointment. He absorbed these setbacks without being defined by them. He understood that careers are narratives with multiple chapters, that redemption was always possible until the final whistle. The cultural bridge he represented between different footballing philosophies enriched the sport. He brought French flair to Italian discipline, Mediterranean passion to German efficiency. In an increasingly globalized game, he showed how different football cultures could enhance rather than dilute each other, creating something new from traditional elements. His silence in victory and defeat became its own statement. In an era of elaborate celebrations and emotional outbursts, his restraint stood out. A raised arm, a brief smile, then back to business. This understated approach influenced a generation of players who learned that excellence didn't require constant self-promotion. The technical details that made him special bear examination. The way he received the ball on his back foot, already knowing his next move. The body feints that sent defenders the wrong way without him touching the ball. The ability to strike a ball with the inside of his foot as powerfully as others did with their laces. These weren't tricks, but fundamental reimaginings of football technique. His vision operated on multiple levels simultaneously. He saw not just where players were, but where they would be, not just the obvious pass, but the one that would develop 3 moves later. This predictive ability, combined with technical excellence to execute his ideas, made him seem psychic at times, playing passes to spaces that teammates didn't know they should occupy until the ball arrived. The economy of his movement became more pronounced as he aged, compensating for declining pace with superior positioning. Young players studied how he conserved energy, walking when others ran, yet always being available when needed. This efficiency extended his career and influenced how football thinks about longevity and adaptation. His relationship with teammates revealed leadership through example rather than words. He made others better not through shouting or demanding, but by consistently providing them with opportunities to succeed. Players who seemed ordinary became extraordinary in his presence, their careers defined by the seasons they spent alongside him. The aesthetic education he provided went beyond football. His movement had a balletic quality that attracted artists and intellectuals who normally ignored sport. Philosophers wrote about him, poets composed verses about his play, filmmakers used his matches as visual inspiration. He proved that sport could be high culture, worthy of serious artistic consideration. His influence on football television was subtle but significant. Directors began using different camera angles to capture his off-the-ball movement, understanding that watching him when he didn't have possession was often as instructive as when he did. The grammar of football broadcasting evolved partly to better capture what made players like him special. The mythology surrounding certain moments, the volley against Leverkusen, the headers against Brazil, the Panenka in Berlin, grew with each retelling. These became football's equivalent of epic poetry, moments that transcended their immediate context to become cultural touchstones. Children who weren't born when they happened know them by heart, passed down like folklore from one generation to the next. His approach to training influenced coaching methodology. Reports from teammates described his practice sessions as exhibitions of perfection, every drill performed with match intensity and precision. He showed that training wasn't just preparation, but performance, that excellence was a habit formed through constant repetition of correct technique. The paradox of his temperament, mostly calm but occasionally explosive, fascinated psychologists studying elite performance. His red cards weren't random, but followed patterns, usually coming when family or heritage was insulted. This protective instinct, while sometimes destructive, revealed the passion beneath the serene surface, making him more human and relatable despite his otherworldly talent. His contribution to football's globalization went beyond commercial impact. He showed that a player could maintain strong cultural roots while succeeding internationally, that assimilation didn't require abandoning identity. This model became particularly important as football became increasingly multicultural, with players navigating between different worlds. The technical innovations he pioneered became standard practice. The drag-back turn while receiving a pass, killing the ball's momentum while simultaneously changing direction, is now taught in academies worldwide. But teaching the movement is easier than teaching when to use it, the game intelligence that made his techniques effective rather than merely decorative. His influence on transfer market economics was profound. The fee Real Madrid paid seemed insane at the time, but established new parameters for valuing elite talent. Every subsequent record transfer was measured against his, the benchmark for what a transformative player was worth. The inflation in transfer fees that followed can be traced directly to his move to Madrid. The way he dealt with media attention became a template for managing fame. He gave interviews rarely and said little when he did, understanding that mystery enhanced rather than diminished his appeal. In an age of oversharing, his privacy seemed radical, proving that talent could still speak louder than words. His post-match rituals revealed character. He always acknowledged opponents, especially those who had marked him tightly, understanding the difficulty of their job. He waited to celebrate until after consoling defeated opponents, showing that respect for the game transcended competitive outcomes. These gestures, unnoticed by cameras focused on celebrations, mattered to those who experienced them. The evolution of his free kick technique demonstrated continuous learning. Early in his career, he relied on power and placement. Later, he developed variations: the dipped shot, the curved effort, the passed free kick to an unmarked teammate. This constant refinement showed that even established excellence could be improved, that learning never stopped. His understanding of space was architectural. He saw the pitch not as a flat surface, but as a three-dimensional environment with vertical possibilities. His chipped passes and lofted balls utilized aerial space that others ignored, adding layers to attacks that defenses struggled to counter. This spatial intelligence influenced how coaches began thinking about pitch geography. The psychological warfare he conducted was subtle but effective. Opponents spoke of the intimidation of his calmness, how his refusal to be rattled them. He would receive brutal tackles without reaction, then score or assist moments later, sending a message that nothing could stop him from playing his game. His adaptation to different partners showed football intelligence beyond individual brilliance. With Del Piero, he played deeper, knowing the Italian needed space to run into. With Ronaldo, he provided service, understanding the Brazilian's finishing superiority. With Henry, he varied his game, sometimes creating, sometimes finishing. This flexibility made him invaluable to coaches trying to accommodate multiple stars. The commercial legacy of his career extended beyond personal endorsements. He helped establish football players as global brands, showing that marketability didn't require controversy or constant media presence. His image rights deals became templates for subsequent negotiations, establishing precedents that benefited all players. His influence on stadium design was unexpected but real. Architects began considering sightlines that would better showcase individual brilliance, understanding that fans came to see artists like him as much as teams. The modern stadium experience, with giant screens replaying moments of skill, evolved partly to capture and celebrate the kind of play he epitomized. The philosophical questions his career raised about beauty versus efficiency remain central to football debates. Is it better to win ugly or lose beautifully? Can artistry coexist with modern football's physical demands? His career suggested these were false choices, that beauty and effectiveness could be synonymous, but modern football increasingly suggests otherwise. His impact on youth development was profound but complicated. Academies worldwide tried to produce the next Zidane, often missing that his uniqueness came from unstructured development. The street football that shaped him was disappearing, replaced by organized training that might have coached out his individuality. This tension between structure and creativity continues to challenge youth football. The medical management of his career became a case study for sports science. How he maintained elite performance despite lacking exceptional physical attributes fascinated researchers. His injury management, particularly late in his career, influenced how clubs began thinking about load management and career longevity. His cultural impact in North Africa was immense. Despite being French, his Algerian heritage made him a hero across the Maghreb, showing that success in Europe didn't mean abandoning roots. He became a symbol of possibility for millions of young North Africans dreaming of football careers, proof that their background could be a strength rather than an obstacle. The way he processed criticism revealed mental strength. He never responded to media attacks, never defended himself publicly against unfair commentary. This silence wasn't weakness, but confidence, understanding that performance was the only response that mattered. This approach influenced how subsequent generations of players dealt with media pressure. His contribution to football literature was indirect but significant. More books have been written about him than almost any player of his generation, each trying to capture something ineffable about his genius. These works elevated football writing, demanding prose that could match the poetry of his play. The tactical evolution he inspired continued long after retirement. The false nine role, popularized by later players, owed much to his demonstration that traditional positions were limiting constructs. Coaches began designing systems around players who could operate between lines, understanding that positional fluidity could unlock rigid defenses. His influence on football photography was notable. Photographers developed new techniques to capture his movement, using slower shutter speeds to show motion, different angles to reveal his vision. The iconic images of his career became art pieces, displayed in galleries, showing that sports photography could transcend documentation. The economic impact of his presence was measurable. Television ratings increased when he played, ticket prices rose, merchandise sales spiked. Economists studied the Zidane effect on match attendance and broadcasting rights, quantifying what his artistry was worth in monetary terms. His approach to diet and lifestyle influenced how footballers thought about longevity. Never naturally athletic, he compensated through careful attention to nutrition and rest, showing that careers could be extended through intelligence rather than just physical gifts. This professional approach became standard as careers lengthened and demands increased. The way he dealt with racism throughout his career provided a model for dignity under provocation. He rarely spoke about the abuse he received, preferring to let his football respond. When he did address it, his words were measured but powerful, using his platform responsibly to highlight issues without becoming defined by them. His influence on football fashion was understated but real. The way he wore his socks low, his shirt untucked just so, became style statements copied worldwide. He showed that elegance extended beyond play to presentation, that how you looked mattered as much as how you played. The psychological profile that emerged from studying his career fascinated sports psychologists. His ability to perform under pressure while occasionally succumbing to it, his quiet confidence punctuated by moments of rage, his artistic temperament in a physical sport. These contradictions challenged simple categorizations of athletic mentality. His contribution to football tactics went beyond individual brilliance. Teams had to develop new defensive strategies to contain him, leading to innovations in marking systems and defensive positioning. The tactical evolution he forced improved the overall level of the game, raising standards for everyone. The legacy he left at each club transformed their histories. Cannes still celebrates the teenager who gave them their greatest season. Bordeaux's European nights are measured against what he achieved. Juventus's subsequent successes were built on foundations he helped establish. Real Madrid's modern identity as collectors of genius traces directly to his arrival. His influence on football economics extended to wage structures. His salary at Real Madrid established new benchmarks for elite players, forcing clubs to reconsider how they valued and rewarded talent. The financial architecture of modern football, with its enormous wages for stars, partly stems from precedents his contracts established. The way he managed the transition from playing to coaching influenced how clubs began thinking about utilizing retired legends. His patient apprenticeship, learning the coaching trade properly rather than trading on reputation, became a model for former players wanting to transition into management. His impact on football broadcasting continued evolving after retirement. Commentators who had described his play developed vocabularies that influenced how subsequent generations understood the game. The language used to describe creative players, vision, weight of pass, spatial awareness, was refined through attempts to capture what made him special. The philosophical implications of his career extended into broader cultural discussions. His story was used in university courses examining excellence, creativity, and cultural identity. Philosophers debated whether his genius was innate or developed, whether beauty in sport had intrinsic value beyond results. His influence on sports psychology was significant. The mental techniques he used to maintain performance under pressure became case studies for developing psychological resilience in athletes. His ability to compartmentalize, to separate the 110 minutes of potential glory from a lifetime of preparation, provided insights into elite performance mindset. The commercial strategies developed around his image influenced sports marketing globally. The emphasis on elegance and intelligence rather than aggression or controversy showed that different narratives could sell. This diversification of marketing approaches benefited sports commercially and culturally. His contribution to football's artistic heritage was unique. Museums displayed his boots alongside traditional art pieces. His jersey became an artifact worthy of preservation. The goals he scored were analyzed with the same seriousness as musical compositions or architectural designs. The medical analysis of his playing style influenced injury prevention strategies. His ability to avoid serious injuries despite physical targeting showed the protective value of anticipation and technique. Sports medicine began emphasizing movement quality over pure physical conditioning, understanding that how you moved mattered as much as how strong you were. His impact on refereeing was subtle but important. Officials had to evolve to protect creative players from systematic fouling while maintaining game flow. The interpretation of rules gradually shifted to favor attackers, partly in response to the treatment players like him received. The cultural bridges he built extended beyond football. French-Algerian relations, complicated politically, found common ground in celebrating his achievements. He became a symbol of what cooperation could achieve, showing that cultural exchange enriched rather than threatened identity. His influence on football video games was significant. Developers struggled to replicate his style in digital form, leading to innovations in how games captured individual player characteristics. The challenge of programming his unique movements and decision-making pushed gaming technology forward. The way he managed fame influenced celebrity culture beyond sports. His demonstration that privacy and success weren't mutually exclusive provided an alternative model for public figures. The mystique created by his silence proved more powerful than constant exposure. His contribution to football education extended into coaching courses. His matches became teaching materials, dissected to understand decision-making, spatial awareness, and technical execution. Coaches studied not just what he did, but why, trying to understand the thinking behind the genius. The economic impact of his retirement was measurable. Television ratings dropped, merchandise sales declined, attendance figures fell. His absence created a void that took years to fill, demonstrating how individual brilliance could drive an entire industry. His influence on football governance was indirect but important. The treatment he received led to rule changes protecting creative players. The accumulated yellow cards that caused suspensions, the violent tackles that went unpunished. These issues received attention partly because they affected him. The psychological techniques he developed for managing pressure influenced performance coaching across sports. His visualization methods, his pre-match routines, his way of maintaining calm under extreme stress became templates for developing mental resilience in athletes. His contribution to football's literary canon was substantial. The autobiographies and biographies attempting to capture his essence elevated sports writing, demanding prose worthy of the subject. Writers developed new ways of describing movement and thought, enriching football's vocabulary. The tactical innovations inspired by his play continued evolving. The concept of la pausa, the deliberate slowing of play to reset rhythm, was refined through studying his game management. Coaches began understanding that controlling tempo was as important as controlling possession. His influence on stadium atmosphere was real. Crowds became more appreciative of subtle skills, applauding clever passes as enthusiastically as goals. The education he provided in excellence changed what fans noticed and valued, raising the sophistication of football appreciation. The philosophical questions his career raised about talent development remain relevant. Was his genius despite or because of his unconventional path? Would modern academy systems have produced or suppressed his uniqueness? These debates influence how clubs approach youth development. His impact on football economics extended to infrastructure investment. Clubs upgraded training facilities trying to attract players of his caliber. The standards he set for professional preparation forced institutional improvements benefiting all players. The way he dealt with the end of his career influenced how athletes approach retirement. His decisive break, refusing lucrative opportunities to extend his playing days, showed that knowing when to stop was as important as knowing how to play. His contribution to football's cultural status was immeasurable. He helped establish football as worthy of serious intellectual consideration, as art rather than just entertainment. The respect his play commanded from cultural elites legitimized football in circles that had previously dismissed it. The medical management techniques developed to extend his career influenced sports medicine broadly. The balance between rest and activity, the management of chronic issues while maintaining performance, became templates for managing aging athletes across sports. His influence on transfer negotiations was lasting. The structure of his deals, with image rights and performance bonuses, became standard for elite players. The precedents established in his contracts protected subsequent generations of players in their negotiations. The psychological profile that emerged from his career challenged assumptions about leadership. He showed that quiet influence could be more powerful than vocal command, that leading by example was as effective as leading by instruction. His contribution to football's global reach was foundational. He helped establish football as the world's game, transcending cultural and linguistic barriers through universal excellence. His appeal across demographics and geographies demonstrated football's unique unifying potential. The technical standards he set influenced equipment development. Boots were designed to enhance the kind of touch he exemplified. Ball technology evolved partly to reward the precision he demonstrated. The tools of football adapted to facilitate the kind of play he represented. His approach to competition influenced sporting philosophy. He showed that respecting opponents enhanced rather than diminished competitive intensity. The dignity he maintained in victory and defeat became a model for sporting behavior. The economic models developed around his commercial value influenced how clubs valued players. The understanding that certain players transcended normal metrics, providing value beyond goals and assists, changed transfer market dynamics permanently. His influence on coaching education was profound. His matches became case studies in coaching courses worldwide. The challenge of creating systems that maximized players like him while maintaining team balance became central to tactical education. The way he managed cultural identity influenced discussions about nationalism and sport. His ability to represent France while maintaining connection to Algeria showed that identity could be multiple rather than singular. His contribution to football aesthetics was defining. He established new standards for what beautiful football looked like, influencing how subsequent generations understood and evaluated excellence. The psychological techniques he used for visualization and preparation influenced sports psychology across disciplines. His methods for maintaining focus and managing pressure became standard training for elite athletes. His impact on youth football was complex. While inspiring millions to play, his unique path warned against over-systematizing development. The tension between structure and creativity in youth football partly stems from trying to replicate his journey. The commercial strategies developed around his brand influenced sports marketing globally. The emphasis on elegance and intelligence rather than controversy showed alternative paths to marketability. His influence on football media was lasting. The vocabulary developed to describe his play enriched football commentary. The analytical frameworks created to understand his impact improved football journalism. The philosophical implications of his story extended beyond sport. His journey from invisibility to immortality became a parable about recognizing unconventional excellence. His contribution to football culture was foundational. He helped establish football's artistic legitimacy, showing that sport could produce beauty worthy of serious appreciation. The medical insights gained from managing his career influenced sports medicine broadly. Understanding how he maintained excellence despite physical limitations informed approaches to athlete longevity. His impact on football governance led to rule changes protecting creative players. The treatment he received highlighted the need for better player protection. The economic impact of his career transformed football finance. Transfer fees, wages, commercial rights. Every aspect of football economics was influenced by precedents his career established. His legacy in coaching education continues. His matches remain teaching materials, his decisions studied for insights into football intelligence. The cultural bridges he built through football demonstrated sport's diplomatic potential. His ability to unite diverse communities through excellence showed football's unique social power. His influence on football technology drove innovation. From broadcast techniques to video game development, technology evolved to better capture and replicate what made him special. The psychological model he provided for managing pressure influenced performance coaching across sports. His techniques for maintaining excellence under extreme scrutiny became templates for developing mental resilience. His contribution to football's intellectual development was crucial. He proved that football could bear serious analysis, that sporting excellence deserved thoughtful consideration. The aesthetic standards he established influenced how football is played, watched, and understood. Beauty became a legitimate pursuit alongside victory. His story of transformation, from the streets of Marseille to football immortality, remains inspiration for millions who dare to dream beyond their circumstances. As his tale draws to a close, we return to where we began, a boy with a ball in Marseille, creating magic from nothing. That boy became a man who showed the world that football could be art, that beauty and victory weren't opposites but partners in the same dance. His journey reminds us that greatness often comes disguised as quietness, that the most profound impacts are sometimes made by those who speak least but do most. The legend of Zinedine Zidane transcends football because it's ultimately a human story, of talent recognized late but maximized fully, of success achieved without sacrificing identity, of beauty created under the harshest pressure. He showed us that excellence isn't about being perfect, but about being authentic, that true greatness comes not from never falling, but from always rising, that the most beautiful things in life, like that volley in Glasgow or those headers in Paris, happen when preparation meets opportunity meets courage. His number 5 shirt hangs in museums now, his boots are displayed like religious relics, his goals are watched by millions who weren't born when he scored them. But perhaps his greatest legacy is simpler. He made people love football not for winning or losing, but for the sheer beauty of what's possible when human genius meets a leather ball on a grass field. The boy from La Castellane, who became the king of world football, proved that dreams don't respect boundaries, that talent doesn't follow predictable paths, that sometimes the quietest voices speak loudest through their actions. In a world increasingly divided, his story reminds us that excellence is universal, that beauty transcends difference, that a perfectly weighted pass or an impossible piece of control can unite strangers in shared wonder. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you'll dream of that young boy in Marseille, juggling a worn ball against graffitied walls, unaware that he's practicing moves that millions will try to copy. Perhaps you'll see him walking onto the biggest stages, calm amid chaos, about to paint masterpieces that will live forever. Perhaps you'll understand that greatness isn't about being seen by everyone, but about being ready when your moment comes. If you enjoyed this soothing story of the legends of football, please like the video, subscribe to Legends of Football, and ring the notification bell, and write in comments from which country you are watching this video. Remember that somewhere tonight, in cities and villages across the world, young dreamers are practicing their first touch, perfecting their technique, following in the footsteps of the boy who became Zizou. And perhaps one day their story too will be told, inspiring another generation to believe that with enough passion, dedication, and a little bit of magic, anything is possible on a football pitch. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be filled with the beautiful game's most beautiful moments.